All right, when making vector shapes in Adobe Illustrator, we have learned that you can use the shape tools. The rectangle, the ellipse, the polygon, the star, right? I do not want you to use the line segment tool, just like I didn't want you to use the line tool in Photoshop when we did the emoji. Because we need a shape. We need not just a stroke. And then you can manipulate them, like I've done for these. Then the second tool I showed you in the last video is kind of the opposite of these preset templates. And that's for more hand drawing. And it's the pencil tool. You'll find it under the paintbrush. And if you can't find any of these tools, click on the 3 dots underneath the toolbar. That will show you all the tools. And then you can just bring the tool in that you want, right? So the pencil tool, you just drag and draw, but you have to make sure you end where you began. So that's true of all of these. You need it to be a closed path, not an open path. Let me show you what happens if I have a black fill and no stroke like we want to do, and I draw with the pencil tool a shape, but then I don't close it at the end. So if I let go right now, it turns into an empty path, and if I force it to fill, what happens? It will automatically connect my last point with the starting point with a straight line, and I don't get to control that. So how do we get better control? We close that path always so that it's one solid thing, and then we can fill it. So that's the pencil tool. Shape tool, pencil tool. What's in between those two? Because the problem is the pencil tool makes a lot of anchors, and the shape tool doesn't give us enough to play with, especially without something like transform. So the one that's in between, and the most basic tool within Illustrator, the earliest tool, but in some ways the hardest to learn, is called the pen tool. Shortcut for it is P. So if you use the pen tool, you plot your own anchor points. I want everyone to do this, just so everyone has had some knowledge of the pen tool. And I'll have a question about the pen tool on the final exam, because it's very unique in Illustrator. I want you to just draw a rectangle with the pen tool. So how do you do that? You click and you move. Click and move. And you'll see that it will kind of stick to horizontals and verticals. Click and move. And then we have to close it, right? So even though it looks closed because we're in a fill path, I have to go back to the beginning until I see that circle next to the cursor. And that closes the path. Next, I want you to make an oval in Illustrator with the pen tool. And this is how you do that. You're going to click and then move, and then you're going to click and pull. So that is how you get a curve. And then you're going to go back to the beginning. Okay, the problem is that doesn't look very much like an oval, right? So how do we control it? We use the small selection tool, and then we can manipulate these curves. And so that's a great way to get a teardrop shape. And if I click on that anchor point with that small selection tool, I can play with each curve differently. But how do I get this to be a curve? I actually have to go under the pen tool to what's called the anchor point tool. And you want to think of it as a conversion tool, because anchors can either be straight or curved. And they can be straight on both sides or curved on both sides, or they can be straight on one side and curved on the other. So if I use the anchor point tool, it will turn these straights into curves if I click and drag. And that's how I can get an oval, right? Or if I go the other way, I can kind of twist it on itself and get an hourglass. Now, what's amazing about this is a really complicated shape, right? It's like a bow tie shape. How many anchor points does it have? Just 2. One right there, one right there. So how can it be so complicated? It's because each anchor point has different curves coming out of each side. So that curve can even be, it's one arc, but we have one arc going into another arc. So we're getting an S curve. Now, how can I flip that around? I just take this and I flip it, and I can get back to still just having two anchor points. But it's an oval, which is actually fewer anchor points than if I used the ellipse tool and made an oval. Because that has how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. And all of these have curves. So, showing you a lot of stuff, what does that show us? How can we actually use it? The best way to learn the pen tool is to not do any curves at the beginning. Because that's why it's so unintuitive. I'm just deleting these, getting them out of the way. So now everything here is something you see, right? So the best way to use the pen tool, let's say I wanted to draw the rest of this shape with the pen tool. I can do Command plus to zoom in. I'm going to use the pen, and then I'm just going to, like you did with the rectangle, just click and click, move 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 and click. This is called polygonal design. Move and click, move and click. Don't worry what the black is doing. It's just trying to close the path from wherever I am. Okay, and then I'm just going to go all the way up here, all the way here, all the way here, and then I got to go back to where I started till I get that closed circle. Now, and then I'm going to click off of it. So you see how that looks a lot worse, especially if I turn off my sketch. You see how that looks a lot worse than my smooth curves, and that's because it's made of so many more anchor points. How can I turn those into curves? Well, do you see those circles next to the anchor points? Here's the anchor point. It's always a square. This is what's called the cornering or the rounding tool. And I wish I could make it bigger. I can't. They're always going to be the same size. But if I round it, but I can zoom in on it, even though if I click on that circle, it will split my anchor point and it softens it. But it did it to all of them. So if I just click on one anchor point with the small selection tool, then I can round it until it hits both of the anchor points it comes from, right? And I can figure out the curve I want. Then I can do this one and soften that out. And then I can do this one and soften that out. Now this is different than the convert tool. It's not pulling handles. Instead, it's averaging and it's actually reducing the number of anchor points I use. Now here, if I use the curving on the inside, it actually changes my point, so I don't want to use it there. So this is an easy way. You draw it all with all straight lines, and then you use the rounding tool just to round the anchor points that you want to soften. Now it's a little time consuming, and I would prefer to do it with the pencil and just draw it, or to build it with shapes, but it depends on what you're working on. So I'll show you how you can do all of it with the pen tool, kind of the way Illustrator is meant to be used, but it's difficult. It takes kind of trust in the program, which can be hard to have. So I still have this portion to do. How can I do that all with the pen tool? in real time. So now I use the pen. I start, and I know I want a curve right away. I know I don't want a straight. So I go to where I think the end of that curve would be, maybe here. And then I click and I drag and I pull out handles exactly to the curve I want. Then it's going to automatically give me what's called a sympathetic curve to come out from that curve. I can't turn this into a straight yet. If I hold down Command, it moves off of it, right? So I just want to use that sympathetic curve where I find it, and then I'm back to straights, and I have to close it up. And you see how that's much cleaner than this. So let me try to do that with this, and I'll get a much cleaner shape. So I'm going to start, then I'm going to find where I think I can make the curve, and then click and drag, make the curve, and then follow this sympathetic curve up and around, even if it's as far as to here. And then I'm going to start here, and then find my curve again, click and drag, and then use the sympathetic curve to go out of it. And then I'm going to click here, and here, and here, and here, and here, because I'm just trying to get that solid shape done, and then I have to end where I began. Now I can use the small selection tool, and this is the one that feels a little off. It just feels a little flat. So what can I do? I can click just on that anchor point, and I can move it a little bit, and I can play with its curves individually on each side and kind of tighten it up to what I want. So maybe like that. This one feels a little out of place, so I'm just going to play with this, play with these curves till it feels like what I want. So that is step one. Look how many shapes that took to layer up in all those different methods, using the shape tool, using the pencil tool, using the pen tool. Now, what if I try it again? I'm going to lock this, close it, make a new layer. This time the anchor points will be green. My favorite tool is the pencil tool because with your tablet, it can be just like drawing. So if I double click on it and I set it to be more smooth than accurate, I like it right there, like 75% smooth. And then I have a black fill, no stroke. And then I just start drawing, even though my hand might shake a little bit. And I can always edit it after. And of course, with practice, this gets easier. And then you have to end where you began. Fill it with black, right? There's only one place that's really messed up, and that's where I ended it, right? It kind of artificially smoothed it. So what do? This is why I love the pencil tool so much. Once you see the anchor points, the pencil tool, if you start on the path and end on the path, it's like magic scissors. It will redraw it. So if I didn't quite match this curve, what do? I start on the path, and like magic scissors, I can make it grow. And end on the path, I can redraw it. Now, what if it's not as smooth as I like, right? Like that got a little bumpy and weird. Well, I can always just redraw it again. And then there's this tool called the smooth tool. And the smooth tool, you can just kind of go over and everything's pretty much perfectly smooth except maybe that one, and it will average them out, right? It will average out your anchor points. So you can smooth it after the fact.